how's it going? After slogging through the game on Growlithe last week, I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger and do a run on what most people unanimously consider the best pre-evolved Pokemon, and that is Gastly. It has an impressive 80 speed and an elite level 100 special stat, and its move pool also has a lot of potential. Nightshade, Confuse Ray, and Lick are the starter moves, and they can easily breeze past the early game, while moves like Psychic and Thunderbolt can provide coverage for the latter half of the game. The one early critique of Gastly that I would have is that it doesn't have any access to batch boosting moves, but we'll have to see how that affects the run going forward. There are a couple of specific battles late in the game that I could foresee potentially being problematic, but we'll get into that much later. And without further ado, let's see if Gastly is indeed the king of Generation 1 pre-evolved solo runs. Like all runs, I reset until I get decent DVs. I think this is pivotal into getting the best representation of a Pokemon's potential in these type of runs. And up front, I'll state that we are going for minimum battles, which means that after battling the one and only mandatory trainer in Viridian Forest, it's time to immediately face Brock. And you'll quickly start to get the idea of what makes Gastly's ghost typing so overpowered for the first half of the game. Like Geodude and Onix here, most of the Pokemon have only normal damaging moves, which means they can't even hit Gastly. Brock isn't challenging at all. Any of the moves will work well here, but Nightshade does the best job. Bide can hit you from the Onix, but obviously you want to avoid that, and you just use Confuse Ray. And while this isn't the fastest Brock fight in the world, it has to be the safest Brock fight. Skipping ahead to Cerulean City, it's safer to go ahead and fight rival number 2 rather than face Misty, and this fight isn't too bad. Pidgeotto and Sand Attack are your only real annoyances, but this is an opportunity to talk about how there are a lot of normal Pokemon in the game, especially early, and this means Gastly's 15 PP of Nightshade is needed to get past them, as Lick does not affect them. The same applies to Psychic types because Generation 1 is Generation 1, and it's worth briefly talking about this now as there are a lot of mandatory battles that have normal types that I won't be showing. And this is kind of a caveat to Gastly's early game relying on Nightshade. Nugget Bridge and the route to Bill's house was simple enough, and now it's time to fight Misty. The first time I get an unlucky crit on Bubble Beam to force my first reset, but we get her down on the second time. I Confuse Ray the Staryu to give myself the 50-50 to avoid all damage, and 2 Nightshades take it out. The Starmie is a problem, it outspeeds me and it has a high critical hit rate, and although I do take this battle on my second try, I highly suspect that you need to have the Starmie confused and hit itself at least once to do this comfortably. With 2 gems down, it's time to make it to the SSN, but I'm going to specifically name drop this specific last that has 3 Pidgeys, and all of them love to use Sand Attack. This is one of the few trainers in the game that actually forced a reset, and this is a prime example of why the 15 Nightshade PP sometimes isn't enough to last through long stretches of the game, especially if you get Sand Attack and all of that. It's important in this instant because getting a fast time requires you to have enough PP to get past these trainers, rival number 3, and Lieutenant Surge before you dig straight back to Cerulean City, but I digress. Moving on, aboard the SSN, it's time to fight rival number 3. And I use an Ether here on Nightshade since he has 3 Pokemon that are immune to Lick. This fight does take me 2 times because I get hit with multiple Sand Attacks, but the second attempt goes much better. Like the previous rival fight, Confuse Ray and Nightshade are enough to deal with Pidgeotto, although it does get off the dreaded Sand Attack off once. And there's not much deviation to the strategy this early in the game. I use the Confusion status as protection, and I use the leveled damage from Nightshade to easily get past this. After getting cut, it's time to take on Lieutenant Surge, and I'm not somebody who hides or skims over things, and I have to say, Surge took me about 4 or 5 times. I think it's important to note because a lot of these runs you see on big channels are condensed and they look like they're perfectly easy runs, but the main problem here was Pikachu likes to use Thunder Wave, and the secondary problem is the high critical rate of Raichu. The strategy is the same as rival number 3, and although I didn't do a play-by-play on the battle, just know that it wasn't a one-shot, but we do get past it. The real prize here is obtaining Thunderbolt from Surge, and it will be paramount in the run for many battles to come. Now it's on to Rock Tunnel, and there's not really much to say about this, but I do underestimate the very first trainer. It has a Cubone, and I get clubbed to death with a Bone Club. I do make adjustments, and now we can skip all the way ahead to the Rocket Hideout, and things are smooth here as well. but I do feel like I might have made a mistake. I could have went ahead and did my errands in the Celadon Pokemart and went ahead and got Psychic. That might have made these battles a little bit faster, but the silver lining is that maybe it would have saved us 3, 4, 5 turns at best, and I don't know how much of a time save that would actually be. The first Giovanni fight isn't an issue. There's still a lot of normal moves being thrown around, and at our level, Nightshade can still two-shot the electric immune ground types, and Thunderbolt can be utilized on the Kangaskhan for another one-shot battle. I pick up Fly and I head over to Pokemon Tower, and my mindset during the run was to get the fastest time possible, and once again, I hold off on Saffron City to get Psychic for the moment. And just for the sake of comparisons, it's funny because saving right here in the tower, I'm 1 minute ahead of where Growlithe was at after Brock. Now it's time for rival number 4. Usually the easiest of the rival fights, and with Thunderbolt, this time it's no exception. Thunderbolt allows us the much needed coverage to get past Pidgeotto and Wartortle. Nightshade is still in the move pool to take care of Execute and Kadabra, and it's another easy fight. After Pokemon Tower, it's time to take a quick dip into Saffron, and we pick up Psychic finally, and then I proceed to Erica before I forget that this gym exists. This gym battle overall is made trivial with Psychic and the fact that Gastly double resists Grass. Psychic can one-hit the Victory Bell, which is the key to avoiding any of those pesky status conditions. Tangela does take an additional hit to go down, and the Vileplume barely survives a Psychic, but overall, this is another easy one. And now it's time to not beat up the Snorlax, and we just kindly ask him to leave because this is minimum battles and we cannot battle everything. And from there we head towards Koga, and be mindful of the jugglers on the way to him. I don't run into any problems personally, and I don't have to reset, but these are the first of the Psychic type problems that you'll start to encounter in the final dozen or so battles left in the game, and the Koga fight itself isn't that bad. They are all weak to Psychic, and the usual problem with Koga is getting hit with that self-destruct at the very end by wheezing after you've been chipped down with poison and whatnot. Now Gastly cannot be poisoned, it resists poison damage, double resists poison damage I should say, and it's immune to self-destruct. And it goes without saying that this makes Koga one of the easier fights in the entire game. You'd have to really go out of your way to lose this gym battle. After that, it's time to dip into the Safari Zone. We get our last HMs of the run, and now it's time to head on to the dreaded Silph Company, and that means it's time for rival number 5. This one takes me 2 times, and this is because of the Alakazam. All of his other Pokemon are not an issue. Nightshade, Thunderbolt, and Psychic all provide enough damage and coverage, but Alakazam is very fast, and it will absolutely obliterate you, and that's exactly what happens on the first time. This Pokemon is very scary for Gastly, and it's only going to get worse after this. Skipping ahead in the second attempt, the only way you can really deal with Alakazam is to use Hypnosis. It neutralizes the damage, and a few Nightshades is enough to get past him. Needing to use the 60% accuracy Hypnosis isn't that reliable, but pre-Elite 4 battles, you can do that since you can just keep retrying until you get it, but it's worth mentioning. Blastoise is last, but we have Thunderbolt, and it's the least of Gastly's worries in this battle. After it's all said and done, it's time for Giovanni number 2, and this battle's over in about 20 seconds. Psychic shreds through his poison types and deals heavy damage to the ones that aren't weak to it, and this is yet another easy battle for this little bitty ball of gas. With Saffron opened up, it's time to get Mimic. It's our top priority, so I go trade the Pokédoll for that. And next up is Sabrina, and looking back, perhaps I should have just saved her for the end, because we just saw how troublesome Alakazam can be, but we all know that hindsight's 50-50, but let's just see how it goes. And the answer is not that great. Now let's take a look at the beginning of the Psychic struggles of Gastly. The first attempt, I make it to Alakazam, it outspeeds me and hits me for very heavy damage with Psywave of all moves. I go for Hypnosis, but it immediately wakes up, and the battle's over. The second time, Venomoth survives a Psychic, and it decides it wants to critically hit me with a Psybeam, and that forces another reset. The next time Kadabra wants to act up, critical hit Psychic will do it. Cool. And then just to show me that it doesn't need Psychic, a critical hit Psybeam gives me the same results. Once again, Kadabra, Psychic, battle over. And finally, with enough persistence, things can go our way, and this is all thanks to Hypnosis and the overpowered nature of Sleep in Generation 1. It's required for Kadabra, and once asleep, it only takes 2 Nightshades to knock it out. Mr. Mime is the one abomination that never caused me problems, and Hypnosis is not needed. 2 Nightshades will get the job done here. Venomoth can survive a hit, and it retaliates with a Psybeam for a decent chunk of damage, but it goes down on the next turn. And finally, the bane of this run. You need luck in this fight, Alakazam needs to just not obliterate you on the first turn or use a move like Reflect like it does here. Now you need even more luck, you need Hypnosis not only to hit, but you need it to hold out for a few turns, and if that goes your way, 3 Nightshades will get you past this fight. Crisis averted. And as we surf down to Cinnabar towards Blaine, let's reflect a little bit. If anything, this shows that Gastly has troubles like all Pokemon, and he's not perfect. As previously mentioned, perhaps facing Blaine first, then coming back might have helped, but I'm not convinced that it would have actually saved in-game time. Either way, there are only 8 battles left, and 2 of those battles have Alakazams in them. But first, it's time for Blaine. After a little bit of Tombstoner, brother, I fail the first attempt on Blaine. I try to be cautious with Arcanine. I go for Hypnosis. I miss a couple of times, and then he just goes for Fire Blast. I think I could have done this battle in one shot if I would have just used attacking moves. And the second attempt goes great. The pre-evolved Pokemon take a couple of hits, barring a retroactive potion, but they don't do much in terms of hurting Gastly, and they eventually go down. Rapidash has Fire Spin, which is annoying, but the damage it does is minimal with Gastly's high special, and this is more of a test of patience and tedium, if anything. Arcanine's Fire Blast is a little worrisome from the last battle, so I do go for Hypnosis again, just to make this little puppy docile, and 3 Psychics get the job done, and with that, it's on to the last gym. On my first Giovanni attempt, Dugtrio uses Dig. I forgot he had Dig, and Gastly just folds like a piece of paper, and that's a reset. And what I like most about Gastly is that it usually learns its lesson on the first time. After dispatching the Rhyhorn, I put the Dugtrio to sleep, and I'm sorry little Diggy boy, you do not get to play the game anymore. The rest of his Pokemon fold the Psychic fairly easily, and since this isn't Yellow version, his Pokemon do not know Earthquake, and really can't do much to Gastly. This fight is very easy, but it's mainly due to how poor the move pools are for Giovanni's Pokemon more than anything else. And with that, the regular season is over. There are 6 battles left, but a third of them have Alakazams. Let's check in how the first brush with the Zam goes in rival number 6. But first, it's time to get rid of Nightshade. It's been a great move, loved it, but Mimic is needed at this point in the run. And I choose this point because Pidgeot has Agility, and we can use that to not only badge boost, but to legitimately get the speed for Alakazam. The first attempt, I level up mid-battle, and I get paralyzed eventually. Alakazam comes in, he's just licking his chops at the free meal and puts me down like the dog that I am. So Gastly 2 times, what I like to call it now, does what it does best, and it downloads the strategies, calculates everything needed to be done to get past this battle, and with the knowledge that I'll level up after the Growlithe, I mimic Agility, and then I proceed as normal. The main change up to the strategy is that I don't want to take those pesky status conditions like Paralysis or Sleep from Execute, so I put it to sleep, and I pray that it lasts. It doesn't, I have to reapply it, but overall I do get off my 3 agilities, and I don't really have a great way to deal damage to these eggs, but Thunderbolt does take it down in 3 hits. And now it's time for Gastly's personal demon. Watching the footage, I'm actually shocked that I didn't use Hypnosis here. I was living on the edge, I guess. It takes 3 Thunderbolts, I outspeed it. After the first, I get Reflect. Perfect. After the second, it does Psychic. Not perfect. It does massive damage even with the badge boost, but thankfully it's not a crit, and then I take it out. Last up is Blastoise, and I'm not sure if it would have mattered here, but I do crit with a Thunderbolt, and I take it out in a single hit. I'm guessing that it wouldn't take it out, but I'm not going to retry it. We'll just have to take this victory and just speculate to the end of time. And that was rival number 6. Honestly, not too bad. But to do a little bit of foreshadowing, I'm not so confident about the Alakazam at the end of the Elite Four, because it just means that I have to go back and reset to Lorelei every time I lose to it, and it means it's going to take longer to set up strategies, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Let's get into it. First up is Lorelei, and we have Thunderbolt, but that alone is not enough to comfortably get this fight consistent. With Lorelei's good AI, she'll always use Rest on Dugong since it's a super effective Psychic move, Generation 1. Thunderbolt is a 2-hit knockout, but she will rest after the first one, so it's basically a 3-hit, and this one is impossible to lose to. Cloyster is up next, and outside of Supersonic, there's not much issue. Even if it does use a move, Gastly's high special means you won't take much damage, and Thunderbolt is super effective. In this battle, you can just see how much damage Thunderbolt actually does, and in this particular one, it triggers a retroactive potion, so it actually does nothing to me. Slowbro is up next, and this is where you have to use a little bit of strategy. This is where you use Mimic, and you take the grossly overpowered Amnesia, and you set it up. Slowbro will only use Amnesia because it's a Psychic move, and super effective against Poison. And you would think with Slowbro's raised special, it would take a while to go down, but when you use 3 Amnesias on Gastly, combined with its base special and the badge boost, that means that not even Slowbro with 3 Amnesias is safe. It does quite heavy damage, and although it doesn't one-shot it, it's pretty close. Jinx is next, and it's another one-shot. It's worth noting that you have to use Amnesia or this battle will be pretty tough, especially at this low of a level. You can lose if you try to do this battle without Amnesia. Lapras is last, and with the boost it goes down to about half health with 1 Thunderbolt. It generally likes to go for Confuse Ray, but with our special stat, even a Hydro Pump wouldn't be an issue at this point. Overall, this is a pretty easy fight, and not surprisingly, Gastly is one of the easiest times I've ever had on Lorelei, even at sub level 50, which is pretty impressive. Next up is Bruno, and I'm going to make this one quick. The 2 Onyxes are always going to be weak, especially to special attacks, and the 3 remaining fighting tops take super effective damage from Psychic. The Machamp can tank a Psychic, but the funny part of this fight is that only the Hitmonchan can even do damage to you. This is the weakest that Bruno has ever looked in his entire life, and that's saying a lot, folks. Agatha is up next, and this is where you have to use all your rare candies pre-fight, and this fight isn't perfect, but it was pretty consistent throughout the times I went through the Elite Four. This is another area where Psychic helps out a lot. The final attempt here is actually pretty sloppy, but let's take a look. I take several Nightshades, and the Gengar and Haunter aren't one-shots with Psychic. Golbat and Arbok do easily go down, but the last Gengar, it's a lot safer to use Hypnosis, and 2 Psychics will end the fight. If you really wanted to be safe, Hypnosis on the ghost types would help out a lot, but at this point I opted to go for the guaranteed damage, and I'll let Agatha's AI go for the risky moves, since a single wasted move by her means that she will lose the Pokemon since I outspeed her. And this is another easy fight, and the momentum doesn't end there. Just to demonstrate how tailor-made Gastly is to beating Lance, I'm not even going to heal from the Agatha fight, and we're going to go into the Lance fight at 23 HP. And here's how the fight plays out. We'll talk about what makes Gastly dominate this fight. Thunderbolt for the Gyarados is the first thing. Ghost typing means that outside of the Dragon Rages on the 2 Dragonairs, it can't even do damage to me. Poison typing means that the Dragonairs and the Dragonite will always spam their super effective Psychic moves like Agility. You can also use Mimic to take Agility from the Dragonairs, and then at that point Thunderbolt can one-hit the Aerodactyl as well. This fight is extremely hard, if not impossible to lose, and I would say that it's the easiest fight in the entire Elite Four by far for Gastly. And so far you're probably thinking, this looks suspiciously easy, but the champion battle was really tough and it took me a while to get through, and we're going to look through some of my failures real quick, and then we'll talk about the final strategy. And you would think that the Alakazam is going to be the only problem, but right here, just look at the Pidgeot take my head off with the Sky Attack, and then the Alakazam comes in, you know what happens. Here's a critical hit Psybeam that takes away my entire health bar, yeah! And this time I make it past the Alakazam, and I was popping champagne and we were celebrating here in the Matt household, but Arcanine takes me down to low health and a Blizzard from Blastoise finishes me off. This one was painful. Alakazam, I'm not going to undersell it, it's still the brunt of the issues. In this one, I miss a Sky Attack that I mimicked, and then I take a Psychic straight to the dome. I think this failed attempt right here is the funniest one. Pidgeot uses Mirror Move after I use Mimic, and then it mimics my Hypnosis, and then it puts me to sleep, and then it pummels me down. This not only humiliates me, but it simultaneously impresses me. Very good job, AI. I've never seen this before. Alakazam, Psychic, dead, restart to Lorelei. This is one where I get past Alakazam, but not before taking a lot of damage. Arcanine gets me down to 30 health with an Ember, and the second one crits me to take me out. Now let's take a look at a huge heartbreak. I mimicked the wrong move on Alakazam by pressing A too fast, and I could have had it this time, but I'm too low, and once again the Arcanine tells me to go back to Lorelei. On this failed attempt, it's a reminder to not sleep on Pidgeot. Not to put it to sleep, but don't, you get what I'm saying. It can and will mess you up if you're just overlooking it. It gets me low enough to make the rest of the fight impossible. Now let's take a look at the successful attempt. Pidgeot is straightforward. You go straight for Thunderbolt, and you hope that it doesn't crit you back enough or cripple you for the rest of the fight. It goes for the wing attack and does some damage, but I'll take it at this point. Next up is the bane of my existence, Alakazam, and you have to put this rude dude to sleep. The problem here is that he outspeeds you, and all you can really do is hope for a Reflect, and it goes for Psybeam. It takes us all the way down to 17 health. This fight is not looking good. Hypnosis does hit it, and now it's time for the top secret weapon, and that is to use Mimic on Recover, which I failed to do in an earlier attempt because I tapped A too much. Alakazam manages to keep napping long enough for me to get off 3 Thunderbolts to finally move on. Next up is Rhydon, and it cannot deal any damage to Gastly, and it's a brief reprieve from the action, and it's our chance to heal up. 2 Recovers get our health back up to full, and 2 more Psychics move us on to the Arcanine. I dish out 2 Psychics, it dishes out 2 Embers, I go ahead and I heal, and it does another Ember, meaning that we've taken a net worth of damage of 1 Ember, and then I go ahead and use a lethal Psychic, and we move on to Executor. And the funny thing about Executor is that it knows Hypnosis, which is annoying, but for damage it only has 2 normal moves, and that means it cannot hurt Gastly, so there's 0 danger of losing this fight. It's just very annoying, you're gonna get put to sleep, and it makes this a test of patience. It's a long slog, but eventually I heal up to full health, and I knock it out. This one just takes a long time. And now it's mano y mano. Blastoise versus the Great Gastly. I go first. Thunderbolt does heavy damage for about 70% of its health, and I get a paralysis. It doesn't matter because Blastoise goes for a Hydro Pump, which does very heavy damage, over half of our health in a single shot, but it's too little too late at this point. Another Thunderbolt, and that's all that's required to defeat the champion and ultimately end the run. And throughout the entire run, the champion fight is the only hiccup that I really ran into. It took me several times to get past, and each time I had to restart at Lorelei, so it made it rather tedious. Honestly, it kind of shocked me that Alakazam wasn't the only threat on his team, but considering that this was the only huge hurdle Gastly actually had, I'd say that bodes pretty well for his final score. And I'm not going to mince words here, Gastly was incredible. We already knew that it would be, but it finishes the game at level 61 with an almost unbelievable time of 3 hours and 17 minutes. To put this into some perspective from my last video, Growlithe made it to Koga at 3 hours and 30 minutes into the game. Gastly absolutely crushed it, and it's approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes ahead of the next closest time, which is Tentacool. This means that Gastly is in a class and tier of its own, and I've rummaged through all the pre-evolved Pokemon, and I'm fairly confident that I can say that nothing will ever be able to come close to Gastly's time. Just sitting here thinking about it, I don't even think most evolved Pokemon can come close to this time. Ultimately, I think that means that we found the champion, and I think most people already knew how good Gastly was. Thunderbolt and Psychic at the core provides elite level coverage, especially at the end of the game for the Elite Four. Ice Beam would have been great, but if you're poison typing, that means you don't really need it for Lance because of how they react using their psychic moves. You can also take into account that the Ghost typing being immune to a lot of moves throughout the game, on top of Gastly's extremely high special and good speed, and it's just really easy to see why Gastly was so good. I think after this one, I need to move on to some evolved Pokemon and chase that high of getting a new high score here, and we'll see what I decide eventually. But anyway guys, that's about it for me. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy this type of content and hit the bell. I do these solo runs generally every week, and I'd love to hear any feedback, discussion, or even criticism down in the comments below. And I guess I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye!